Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. So as you can see here, we've now got the head on the engine, and I just want to assure many of you guys there's already a new head gasket sitting in between this head. Obviously that's the first thing you want to make sure you've got on before you put the head on. Secondly, you want to make sure your alignment dowels for your heads are already on, or they may be stuck in the heads when you actually take them off. If they are, take them out, put them on the engine block, ready for the heads to go in place so they align properly. Third thing is, make sure you got the right head on. As many of you guys know, and some of you won't know, these heads are coded. What you can see here is a number right here where I'm touching, which says 1A, and you've also got 1B. Now 1A goes towards the right side of the car, which is my driver's side. 1A will sit on my driver's side, 1B will sit on my passenger side. You have to get them right. You can't get them mixed up, because otherwise the tensioners will not align with the holes on the side of the cams. So do make sure you don't do a mix up. Try and make sure your heads are as clean as they possibly can before you put your bolts in. Many of you guys know these are torque to yield bolts. What you don't want to end up doing is putting in the bolts and then wanting to take your heads off, or making a mistake and then you have to take the head bolts off again. Now, obviously there's a lot of speculation if you can't reuse the bolts. You know, there's a lot of people out there that are engine builders that say you can reuse TTY head bolts, and they've never had no issue, and they've done it on plenty of engines. I personally would not use that on a, for instance, turbocharged car. On this one, possibly you could. It's a 12:1 ratio. It's not very high compression. Obviously, if you're not tracking it, the bolt should be fine, but obviously there's a risk in everything. If you want to be back down here doing heads again, then that's entirely your choice. I'm choosing not to. I've got new head bolts. As I said, I've got brand new L-ring ones that we're going to be using. But there is a lot of people out there who find it a lot of money for a lot of TTY bolts, which are, you know, they're about £86 for 12, and you got to figure that out. There's 24 you need. So it's a lot of money on torque to yield bolts. Obviously, if you've rebuilt the engine and you know it, and for instance, you make a mistake, you haven't warmed up the car, you haven't started the car, and you have made a mistake and you've torqued them down, then probably, yes, you can get away with using them if you have to take the heads off quickly because you made a mistake and you've already torqued them all down. But I would not recommend it if, for instance, it's the first time stripping the engine down, you know nothing about the car, and you're gonna go ahead and reuse the head bolts because you don't even know if they've ever been reused before. You don't know the history, you don't know nothing. I would not advise doing that whatsoever. We're gonna go ahead and torque up all the head bolts. Obviously they are in stages. You have to seat the head first, then unloosen them, then torque them down again to a lower torque, then turn them at a certain degree. I'll show you all that as we move on, but let's get onto it. So right here you can see these are brand new L-ring head bolts. You can see there, they say L-ring on them. I'm gonna go ahead and drop them all in. You can see there, they're all in the box, so they're new. We're gonna go ahead and just drop them in to where they're meant to go. So one will go down there, the other one will go down there, and so on and so on and so on. We'll just drop them into their slots. It doesn't matter what way you put them in, it matters about what way you tighten them. So do remember that. It's not too much about doing it like this, you know, dropping them into the heads. Just be careful, obviously don't damage anything in the process. Now, I know many of you are probably thinking, I'm just putting these heads back on without cleaning them, without doing nothing. I can assure you right now, I have changed all the valve stem seals already. I did that off video. I did that when the heads first come off. Cleaned all the valves off of all the carbon and everything else. Everything is cleaned, everything is new. I wouldn't even put this head back if it wasn't done. They've already been done. Valve stem seals are completely done already, so I don't even have to worry about that. Now, obviously, you can see here we've got all the torque bolts in. Now I've got to get the torque wrench. We've got to tighten them down first by hand, and then we'll torque them up to where it needs to be. Seat the head, unloosen them, and do the torque sequence. And then obviously there's two 70-degree angle turns I have to do to make sure they properly sit down. And obviously that's the stretch mark which you need to do with these bolts. Obviously we'll just go ahead and just hand tighten them down. So the first stage is to torque them down to 22 foot-pounds, which you can see on my torque wrench. I've got it set onto 22 foot-pounds. You can possibly see it there. We're going to go ahead and talk them in stages. So obviously this is the first one. We're going to move from outside in. So we'll just do that and we'll just get it to 22 foot-pounds. And then we'll move to number 2, which is this one. Now we've done that, what we've got to do now is unloosen them in the reverse order, so 12 back to 1, because now we've seated the head, so we'll unloosen them. Then what we'll do is we go and torque them down again, then we do the 2-degree turns to actually stretch the bolts out so it pulls the head down correctly and do it. And then once that's done, that's the head bolts done, then we move on to installing the hydraulic lifter tray and putting the lifters in as well. So we'll just go ahead and remove them now. So we'll just crack them loose. Okay, so now we've unloosened them. Now we've got to torque them to 15 foot-pounds in the sequence again. So now I'm just going to change my torque wrench to 15 foot-pounds. So now we've got our torque wrench set to 15 foot-pounds. What we're going to go ahead and do is tighten them up in the sequence again. So we'll just do that. So we're going to go from 1. And you can see there 15 foot-pounds isn't a lot. Then we'll go to number 2. And then we'll go to number 3. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to just change my torque wrench to the degrees. So we're just going to click it like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on the first one to hold it straight and make sure it all calibrates, ready for the 70-degree angle. So we'll just hold it here, ready to tighten the first 70-degree angle. And we want to make sure everything's clear on the torque wrench before we do it, which it is. So we'll just turn that 70 degrees. There we go. Now for number 2, make sure you've got enough space to turn in behind you when you do the 70-degree turn. So I can see there on my torque wrench, it gives me a line when it's not ready or it's not been calibrated correctly. So I just reset it until it does it. So we just turn this one to 70 degrees and you've got to be careful as doing this. And that one's done. We'll just click it again, then move on to number 3. We'll just tighten that one down. And now to number 4. And it's a good idea to hold on to the engine when you can, because if your engine's on an engine stand, it will move when you're doing the degrees. And that's them all stretched down on the first one. Now we've got to go around them again with another 70-degree turn. Now, when I used to build engines, it was always a good practice to let the bolts sit and rest before you torque them again. I don't know if that's still the case. I'm probably talking years ago. But I still believe to let them rest before you go to the next torque angle. So that's what I'm gonna go ahead and do. I will let them rest a minute before we go again. Obviously, you don't want to put the bolt under too much stress. And obviously the threads going into the crankcase, so I'll let them rest before I turn them again. Obviously, you know, the bolts are oiled up from factory, but I still just don't want to take the risk anyway. It's what I've always known, to let the bolts rest, especially when you're going to do 2 turns on them anyway. So I'll let them sit a minute and then we'll go again. So now we're going to go ahead again with the next degree. So we're going to start on number 1 again, as we do. And this is where now the bolts will be even tighter than they were the last time. So do keep that in mind. So you can, now the engine's going to pull. So that's why I said to you, hold the engine as you do this, because this 70-degree turn is a lot. So you need to be ready to take it round. And that's the first one done. Then we'll do the second one. And there we have it, guys. That's now all the head bolts torqued down. So now we can move on to putting the lifter tray inside and putting the lifters back in. So before you put your lifter trays back in, you want to make sure you put these seals in first. These are to seal the spark plug tubes from any oil going down there or anything like that. They're in. Now we're going to put the lifter cradle in. So we'll just go ahead and put this lifter cradle inside. You can see all the bolts are still in there because we left them in there when we took them out. We're going to screw them down by hand and then we'll torque them up. So I'll just get my trusty 8mm and just tighten them down. Obviously we're not torquing them down. Now they're all hand tightened down. Now we've got to get a torque wrench and torque them down. So do remember these are 7.5 foot-pounds and you've got to work your way in and out to torque them up. So that's what we're going to do. So we'll work from the middle. We'll just put our socket on there. We'll just tighten them down. That's the first one. Obviously you can see here they're still quite loose. As you start torquing them down, the bolts will become a lot looser than what you thought by hand because they go right deep in to the tray. Now that's all tight, now we're going to go ahead and put the lifters in. So you can see here I've got 2 lifters. These ones right here are the intake side, which I've got this side right here. So the intake side is obviously going to be this side right here. So this is the side you want to put these in, into here for the intake. We'll just slide them in when they can go in, just like that. The one way they can go in. Just like that. There's a pin line for them to sit down, and we'll just do that again with the same one. These are the intake ones, so do remember that the biggest ones are the intake, the small ones are the exhaust. So that's another one in. These are the exhaust ones, the small ones. So these ones don't have an alignment mark on them, they just literally slot in. So you need to find where they go and just slot them on top. Do the same here as well. You guys will get the drift of it watching me do it now. And there you go. That's that one in now as well. So that's all the lifters now in the train. Now we just got to put our spark plug cover gaskets on. So you can see here there's 3 of these that need to go on in place. I'm going to put them on before I put the cams on, purely because these have to be covered. I don't want nothing getting down there, and I'm also going to shove tissue down there because obviously now we've got the head bolts in. Don't want nothing getting in there while I'm playing about the cams. You can see here all the lifters are in. This is the way the guys, I said to you, the biggest ones with the biggest gap underneath. So guys, as you can see, we've now completed this side of the head. Now, I'm not going to be installing the cams today purely because I'm waiting for one more thing, which is the bolts for one of the cogs on the cams. But you can see here, this is how you build up the engine head. We've torqued all the bolts down. We put the lifter tray in, we've put the lifters in, put all the gaskets in. You need to remember to put these back on. This is very, very important. These are your spark plug tube holes. Obviously on the 996, they've got rubber tubes that you can pull out, but on the 997, they don't. The valve cover sits on top of these. This is to stop engine oil entering the spark plug holes. Obviously, do remember your lifters, they can only go one way. This one right here is the exhaust, just remember that. The flattest one, and this is the intake one, which is the highest one and the biggest one. They're both different. You can see here, this one's got like a tip on the top of it, and you can see that these ones are blank. Just remember which way they go. Exhaust, intake, you can see from the ports as well, if you're not too sure where the exhaust is going, obviously where the intake is. Very, very easy, common sense. You really can't mix them up. We're going to put the cams on, obviously, on a later video. I'll show you guys that. We'll put the other head on as well during that video, so we can do the timing and get this thing timed, so we can get the valve covers back on as well. But I hope many of you guys have been enjoying this series, and I hope you're enjoying this Porsche rebuild series. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and as I said to you, the next video is going to be installing the other head, putting on the cam, bolting up all the sprockets, and then doing the engine timing on this, and also show you how to install the other tensioner blade for the other side, the other bank as well. Then we can get this engine built back up and put back in the car once put the valve covers on. But like I said, guys, this is it for today. Thank you very much for watching. It's BMW Dr. Dean here, and goodbye.